Hey everyone, it's me, Kirk Mastin, here at Mastin Labs, and today I'm going to be going over how to balance your exposure without the histogram. And I'm going to do a little bit more than that. I'm going to go over also how to use the histogram if you want, and some cool hidden tools that you can use directly on the histogram as well. So it's going to be like histogram day. So yeah, let's get started. Real quickly, our traditional bulletproof Mastin Labs 3-step workflow. You apply the preset, you adjust exposure, and you adjust white balance and tint. These are the only 3 things that Lightroom can't really do for you or your camera. You have to figure out what the correct exposure and white balance and tint is for your image. The camera might get you in the ballpark, but it's usually wrong. And today we're really going to focus on exposure using the histogram. Okay, so here we are. We are in Lightroom. For those who have been living in like 1977, this is the histogram. Everyone else knows exactly what this is. But the histogram here is a chart that shows you where the pixels in this image are, like the amount of pixels in different tonal ranges. Okay, so we've got the whites up here. Next door we have highlights, exposure, shadows, and then blacks. So in this really high key image, we've got a lot of white and kind of pale skin, and they're on a beach. Almost all of the data in this photo, all the pixel values, are way over here. So you can see they're in the highlights and whites, and that's because most of the image is in the higher key range. If I were to go to an image that has a lot of darker tones, like this one, you can see that almost all of the data, all of the pixels in the image are in the black or shadow area. So that's just my little primer of what the heck a histogram is. It's a map that shows you where that data is. And a lot of people use the histogram to figure out how much to increase or decrease the exposure in the image to even it out to get that perfect exposure. If you've watched like my 300,000 other edit videos, you'll notice that I never use the histogram. I never look at it. I don't care about it. It's a cool tool. I can show you a real quick trick here on how to use it if you want to use it for something. But then I'm going to go into why I don't use it and why it's important to ignore it sometimes. So, okay, I hope that's helpful. Okay, so cool thing of the day. Let me just start with this image here. I'm gonna do a quick 3-step edit. So Superior 400, I'll apply that. I'm actually not gonna touch the exposure thing slider here at all. I'm just gonna get the white balance kind of dialed in. And then I'm gonna show you my cool trick. Not that I would ever do this. You'll watch my other videos, I never do it this way, but I just wanted you to know, because I thought it was really cool when I discovered it in Lightroom, is that you can go up into the histogram here and drag these parts around to adjust exposure. So what I would normally do, especially on film scans, is I would start with the blacks and the whites and get those kind of dialed in. So I'd take the blacks, I'm going to click my mouse and slide left and make them darker. Oh wait, forgot one thing. Hit the J key. That lets you see where you're clipping. That means if you're hitting pure black or pure white, it's just kind of like a guardrail. If you're driving, keeps you from going off the road. So I'm going to now go back to the blacks in the histogram. I'm going to drag them down. And okay, you see that blue appearing down here in his pants? That means I've gone off the road. So I want to come back a little bit. That's pure black. We don't want pure black. I'm just going to go right to the edge of it. The highlights are already pure white, so we don't want to touch those. I'm going to go to highlights, which is the next part down from whites, and that is actually highlight retention. So I'm going to now just drag that back to the left. Okay, I'm just going like this back and forth on the histogram, clicking in these different sections. And then the last thing I'm going to do is exposure. These are the midtones. If I want the overall image to be a little bit darker, I'm going to just click on that and bring it down. And that is actually the opposite of what this entire video is supposed to be about. That is how you actually balance exposure perfectly just using the histogram. I never do it that way because it's like 9 billion clicks and it's not necessary. But that is a way you can do it. And now you know what the histogram is. You know the ability to interact with the histogram itself to edit your photo. I highly recommend this for film scans, by the way, but that's a separate video. But for digital, we're going to do it a little different. So I'm going to close the histogram for now. And I'm going to show you how I normally edit. So here is the raw image, totally reset. I have the J key, I'm turning it on and off. This is how I check my highlights. But the way that our presets are made, they're modeled after actual film, and actual real analog film protects highlights. It's just the way that it works. So you'll see as soon as I apply Superior 400, a lot of those highlights are protected immediately. So I applied Superior 400. I'm going to just drag the exposure slider down, and then I'm going to adjust temperature and tint. So I'm going to bring the temperature down a little bit, go a little bit towards green, just a tiny bit. That is how I normally edit. Don't look at the histogram. The way the preset works is that you are not meant to go up in here and fiddle with blacks, highlights, shadows, etc. It's all contained in the preset itself because it is an accurate model of film, how film works. And just by going through that 3-step process, you can get that nice, soft, but micro contrasty film look, just super quick. And that is how I normally edit images. One thing that's really important to understand too is that if you were to go off the histogram, and I'm not going to fiddle around up in here, but just say I'm just like John Q. Public, hand editor. I don't use presets or anything. A lot of people would look at the histogram and go, man, it looks really underexposed. I mean, just looking at the histogram, and probably want to bring the exposure up to bring all these tones more towards the middle. But one thing that the histogram doesn't take into account is the type of photo it is, whether it's a low-key or high-key photo. Back in photography school, it was called low-key or high-key. It has now become light and airy or dark and moody. They kind of mean roughly the same thing. But this photo right out of the gate is meant to be dark and moody. Just the way it's shot. You got this side light. It's like in Iceland. It's very dark, this dark basalt rock. If I was to edit with the histogram and just like yank up on the exposure slider, I'm starting to kind of ruin the feeling of this photo. It's not meant to be a light and airy photo. And in fact, her dress can't even handle this much exposure. So the histogram would have thrown me off. Now, ignoring it completely, I'm going to just look at this photo with, art in mind. Like, what am I trying to say? How do I want it to look? What's the feeling of it? And this is a dark and moody type of photo, aka low-key photo, for those of you who learned low-key and high-key a long time ago. So I'm going to go into Portrait Pushed. That is our most dark and moody type, feeling pack that we have. And it's got all these wonderful pushed portrait films in it. So these are all films that were emulated, that were pushed in development. So when we were testing, we would take Portrait 160, shoot it at 320, and push it one stop. This is a lot of like inside baseball. Again, we have another video on pushing film. But what happens is the colors shift and you get this really beautiful, moody, muted look when you develop film longer. And that's where these presets come from. And they will fit this image because it is low key. So I'm going to apply Portrait 160, push 2 stops. Without looking at the histogram, I'm going to do a small exposure adjustment. I'm going to warm it up just a tiny bit with temperature. And now if I want to unblock these shadows and I want to keep that film look, I'm not going to go to the histogram. I'm not going to come up here and fiddle around in here, although I could, but that would ruin the film model that we've created. Instead, I'm going to go down to the tone profiles, which come with all of our preset packs, and these are actual tools from the Fuji SP3000 scanner that we use to make all of our emulations. It's a very special scanner. It's got the best tones for film of any scanner ever made, hands down. You can fight me over it. And it has these wonderful tools to help with balancing out shadows and highlights, and those are what I recommend using to balance the exposure. So I've got my basic edit. It has that dark and moody vibe. It's got the shifted reddish shadows of Portrait 160 push 2 stops. And now for the final touch, I'm just going to go to Shadow Soft, and it just bumps up those shadows ever so slightly. So I'm going to roll over it a few times. But using that or All Soft, where I'm also knocking down the highlights, I can get that perfect kind of dark and moody tonal range. Here is before and after. And now that is how this photo is intended to look, the way it is shot. I mean, I can't speak for Nordica because I am not them. They're awesome guys, great photographers over in Europe. But the way that they shoot in general is often kind of dark and moody. And this is one of their raw files, and I know that this is kind of the direction they would have taken it, instead of trying to make it look light and airy, which it's not really meant to. So there's a little, kind of mini lesson within the histogram lesson, that it's important to know what style you're trying to achieve in the final edit, and that may or may not go with having a perfect looking histogram where you're moving all that data to the middle. Because if we would have done that, I'm going to open it up real quick. If we would have tried to move all of this data more towards the middle to have a more even histogram, which they would teach you often in photography school as being the correct exposure, if we would have done that, tried to move it over, you quickly lose the feeling of the photo. And it also messes with the highlights. So this is not the right look for this photo. This is unbalanced exposure. And that happens because I'm trying to get the histogram correct rather than speaking to the way the photo should, the photo wants to be. So let me bring that back down. Okay, now we're back to how it should be. Let me take another example here of where using the histogram to edit could be disastrous or just not get you the right look. So let's take this photo here. I love this photo. It's got a super interesting lighting pattern. It's by Tim Engel. And if I were to look at the histogram, it looks totally crazy. It's, we've got this big chunk over here in the shadow section and a big chunk over here in the highlight section. Now that you understand how the histogram works, that makes sense. This big section here is all of the, it's kind of like yin and yang. Here's all the dark parts of the photo, right? Her face, especially here, her forehead, it's all black. This white part is the white part over here in the histogram. If I were to try to get this information towards the middle, I would lose the feeling of this photo. I haven't even edited it yet, but you can see that it's meant to be kept this way, where only her mouth is kind of lit up. If I were to use a histogram and try to push that data to the middle, we would start getting, it's okay, it looks okay this way, but it's certainly not how it was meant to be, edited. Like, this is me pushing it, as far as I feel comfortable, all that information. But you can see right away, it's like too bright here. It just loses all of its impact. If I go even further, trying to get the bulk of this information over to the side, her mouth is like totally blown out. And again, I don't believe that this is how this photo is meant to look. But, disregarding the histogram and just doing an edit like I normally would, I would go to, I think this would look really good in black and white. So I'm going to go to the Fujicolor Everyday Original, and it has Acros 100, which is one of my favorite black and whites of any of the packs. And after applying that, I would go to exposure and just bring it up, maybe not even that far, just a tiny bit like that. Now that has a lot of impact and it looks really cool. There's a lot of, all the detail remains throughout the entire image. It is a little bit blocked up in the shadows. If you wanted to unblock that, you could again just go to Shadow Soft. So that unblocks it a little bit. But that looks really, really good. And that's without going to the histogram. And the histogram would have, I mean, the histogram still looks kind of crazy, but that is the correct histogram for the way that this image is, the amount of light and shadow in it. So let's take a light and airy example. Let's go the other way. Let's see here. This is an interesting photo because it can go either way. It could be dark and moody or light and airy. But if I was to take this image, open up the histogram and look at it, you would almost say that it's perfect exposure right now. If you look at this histogram chart, there's information all the way through. It's pretty evenly spread. You could just like raise it up a little bit, raise up the exposure a little bit, and that is, you know, it's all distributed nicely. But if you were shooting this and you intended for it to be a light and airy image, you wouldn't be able to get there by just looking at the histogram. In fact, again, this is a case where you have to ignore it. So I'm going to go to Fujicolor Original, 400H, and then I'm going to increase the exposure. And increase the temperature just a tiny bit, maybe a little bit more, and even maybe a little bit more right there. And you would never have gotten to this point had you looked and worked with just the histogram. So this image, even though it was, you know, seemingly kind of underexposed or exposed for the highlights, especially like on the back of her hair, it works really, really well as a light and airy image. The lighting is really diffused and even all the way across. She's got beautiful skin tones. She's wearing white against the ocean. It's kind of just perfectly set up for a classic light and airy look. And it would not have been possible had I gone more of the just really straightforward, you know, editing for the histogram way of balancing exposure. I would still be down, let me just reset this. I'd still be down like here. And that's incorrect. Well, that's not the way I would have interpreted this photo. If we look at the histogram again, now that it's light and airy, you can see everything is just shoved way over to the light part. But if I hit the J key, you can see that nothing is blown out. There's detail all the way across the frame. And this would not have been possible, again, if I had just done a traditional exposure adjustment using histogram. So I hope that is helpful. That is kind of a broad overview of using the histogram. You know, if you wanted to, you could edit inside the histogram, but an overview of the histogram and why I don't use it. Because it will hinder you if you're trying to get a dark and moody image, and it will hinder you if you're trying to get a light and airy image. And those are two very popular ways of editing. And by using just our system, the 3-step system, with the addition of tone profiles where needed, so if I hit all soft, that's even better, you can get that look perfectly. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions at all, please join us in the Mastin Labs community. Anyone is free to join. It doesn't matter if you own anything we make or not. We'd love to see you there. And if you want to see Mastin Labs on your image, you can go there, put it in a Dropbox folder, put a link in the group, and you'll have a ton of people edit it for you so you can see what Mastin Labs looks like on your image, because that is like the best way to know for sure if it's right for you. Also, it's just a very helpful community, and we want to see you grow. If you want to contact us directly, if you have any questions, you can go to m.me/Mastin Labs, and you can send us a direct message because we're always here to help. We want to see you do well. If you're seeing this on YouTube, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button. We've got tons of videos coming out every single week, and you don't want to miss a single one. So until next time, hope you have a great day and happy editing.